All right. Thank you for being here today. Uh, DJ podcaster Isaac Ammons.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah. What's taking up most of your time these days?
Man, it's a lot of parenting. So I'm doing a lot of parenting. My son's a year and a half old now. So we're getting into the groove of actually doing toddler things.
Hmm.
But other than that, I'm trying to get back into creating content.
When you were doing your podcast, how did you select the format for how you're going to do your show?
So really, I just looked around and uh, I started during the whole pandemic. So a lot of it was just trying to fill up a lot of time that I had empty. Um, so just using that, and I've always had a feel for entertainment type stuff. I always loved music, video, um, sound production, stuff like that. So I always noticed that there was a bunch of different groups of people out there that didn't have a platform to talk to or talk about what they do. Because most of the time it's more of the mainstream uh, artists and musicians and whatnot that just really get that platform most of the time. So I figured I would create a show to give that platform to people.
What's the name of that one?
The show is called Let's Talk Entertainment. So
Yeah, I looked at a few of those on Spotify,
yeah,
and maybe I just didn't get into enough of them. But it was like a radio show where you have music and then a little bit of talking between. Is that how all of them are?
so those radio shows came at the end or came towards the uh, end of what I've been running.
Mm.
I just had some time to put some together real quick and wanted to put out some type of content for people. Had some friends sending me songs I could put into it. Um, but most of the time, it's just face to face conversations with artists, poets, musicians, you name it. And we've had it on the show. Um, just sitting and talking, really giving them an opportunity to push what they do and kind of just stepping back and giving them that spotlight.
Okay. Did that start then in the things I've seen on Spotify? Maybe it's not all of the shows, March of 2021 to December of 22.
Uh, I believe so. I could be totally off on my times. But yeah, we kind of just jumped in full force. Um, Started talking with random people. Um,
What was your setup like when you started?
so all I had when I started was a USB mic, um, little cheap USB mic I bought from Walmart, and an old laptop I had. And we were recording straight into Zoom. Um, so it was pretty good. It worked well. Um, then we started branching out and got some a little bit bigger setup. Now have a desk, so that's always nice, and got a decent mic. But we're we're moving right along.
When you were starting to book guests in the beginning, how'd you find them or how'd you get them?
So main thing was word of mouth. Each guest would usually give me a lead for another guest I could have on the show. But most of the time, I'd be on websites such as Podmatch, um, which is a really great resource, really great people on there. Matchmaker.fm is another great resource I used. But really just talking with people and going out and just shooting out random messages to people on Facebook, um, just putting a bug in their ear. Hey, if you want to come on this podcast, I'd love to have you. Let's talk more. Um, and then just marketing that from there.
How'd you keep track of that? Like, did you have a spreadsheet or?
It was a lot of putting stuff in my notes app on my phone.
Hmm.
so, so lots of just plugging that in real quick. Lots of email. Um, with Gmail, you can link it to your calendar on your phone. So we did that. Started using Calendly for a little bit, um, and then I got confused with that.
Hmm.
so I've heard lots of good things about it. It's worked well when I have used it, but then doing working full time job, uh, 9 to 5, factory work, so it was a little tougher just trying to keep up with everything. And being a one man crew is a lot of work.
Yeah. You got to find a way that you can scale it to what you can do. That's my
Yeah,
experience anyway. And then to keep it exciting to you so it
right.
doesn't, it's not like a grind doing it. You don't want it. If it's the grind, then you're not going to do it long, I don't think.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
with my, with scheduling, I first started probably the first 10 or 15 were people that I knew. And then I found the matchmaker.fm, which is different than matchmaker.com. That's a different
Right.
site for
Yeah,
everybody.
don't go to the .com.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to,
So,
go ahead, but
but that one has worked out pretty well. My
yeah,
success rate of people I contact on that and people that actually do it is probably 50%, maybe a little bit less than that. I haven't counted it up recently, but the people in person that I knew, that was my biggest stress starting is if I do this, how can I remain consistent enough and have one person every week, but not
right,
be so far recorded in advance that if there's a current event issue that we talk about or comes up, it's totally past. So it's
right.
I
Yeah,
tried to talk to people within a week of publishing it, and it stayed like that so far. Mainly, I have a few that are every now and then if you plug one in because you had a cancellation, then that one might be a couple weeks that you're
right.
sitting on the recording. And then it also is helpful to have somebody that you can call at a moment's notice if you don't have a show going for that week, just to remain consistent. What's your
Yeah.
experience with as far as like your success rate of asking people that you knew versus asking people that were strangers online?
I feel like the reception has been really, really well received. Most of the time, people that are looking to come on podcast are really open to coming on the podcast. Um, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Uh, just the fact that so the people that I know um, that have come on, it's just been really good casual conversation. Just feel like hanging out and just talking with an old friend. Um, excuse me, but the people online, they've been more than grateful to come on and more than grateful to help out, more than grateful to promote. They've been really helpful in that aspect. I haven't really had much problems with online people that I don't know, so it's been pretty positive.
Well, so with everyone that you contacted and said, "Hey, I have this show. Would you be interested in coming on?" You've gotten every person you asked, or what's your percentage of
Yeah,
success on that?
I'd say I'm probably about 70, 75% um, have come on, and sometimes we've worked tried to work something out and it hasn't lined up, so we haven't been able to put that into effect. But for the most part, I've had really good success with people online.
Wow. Okay. I must be doing something wrong there. I thought 50% success rate was doing okay. I mean, it was sustainable. And I think if I was doing just people I knew or word of mouth, I could probably still make it to one person a week. But that the stress for that was a little higher than I wanted to deal with because if somebody canceled, I didn't want to have nothing and then be scrambling to put something in there just to keep the consistency.
Right,
But
right.
now I started doing three on Wednesdays, release 3 episodes each Wednesday. And that's been going pretty good. At least it takes the stress off of, if someone drops out or something happens and you can't publish that one week, you got another one you can fill in there, and maybe you have two, and then if that doesn't work, maybe you have one, and then if that doesn't work, you got that one person you can talk to that can come on at a moment's notice. But it's the scheduling, keeping track of that is something that can definitely get out of hand if you have a lot of people that you're trying to get the times right. I haven't tried Calendarly. I've had a few people that have sent me links for Calendarly, and I haven't. I'm sure it works well. Or I imagine it works well, but I just haven't thought, let me learn this thing because I got other things I'm trying to
Right,
learn as
right.
far as the podcasting goes.
Yeah, I mean, I used it for 3, 4 months. Um, it was really simple to use, but I always ran into the problem of sometimes the link wouldn't work for me, um,
Mm,
or my link wouldn't work for people. But then also I had to deal with like 4 different email addresses because I had one sending all my scheduling and then one sending to guest requests. And then it was just,
wow.
I need more hands.
Yeah. What would be, if you had a staff, what would be the first thing that you would hire a staff to do?
Probably mostly my booking and uh, scheduling because that
Mm,
would be like that's the hardest part for me is I get sidetracked a lot of stuff comes up, um, and it's just really difficult to keep it all in a line and sometimes things slip through your mind and
yeah.
it's really it's just I don't know, that's something I struggle with, but I think that's
What
what
do
I
you
would do.
what do you do for marketing? Do you put clips out on different channels, or how do you publish your podcast?
Yeah, so I went to Canva and I created a bunch of thumbnails and promotional pictures and just posters uh, for social media. Put out a lot of social media posts. Put out a lot of Instagram posts. Hadn't really gotten into the TikTok phase because I don't like dancing on camera, but but no, and really just putting out anything I can, creating my own Facebook page for the show, and just pushing everything into that, and linking Instagram to my Facebook to that Facebook page is really easy to uh, post on both sites at one time.
Hmm. Yeah, that's the thing I haven't figured out. Well, I don't use Facebook, and I have Instagram and X and YouTube and Spotify. So YouTube and Spotify get the full episodes, and then there's a YouTube's clips channel, and then Spotify, or then X and Instagram, I do clips. And I used to do 6 clips per show if I just had one show. And now I do 2 clips per show. And then it's 2, but it turns out to be 3 because there's just a third closing one. But so 2 or 3 a show. And then you have 3 a week that covers that time between Wednesday to Wednesday for me. Did you pick a day that you did release? Did you have a release schedule, or how's that work for you?
Yeah, so most of the time I would record on Mondays and Tuesdays, um, depending on what I had going on during the week. Um, Most of the time I would put one I would set one interview to release on Friday night at midnight, um, just so it would come out during the night and we'd have that full day of promoting. Um, but if I wouldn't have something coming out on that Friday, um, we would just post sporadically. I never really got into the YouTube clips and Instagram reels and all that because I'm not really good with video editing. I haven't really worked with it much. So that's still a learning process for me. Um, but I know a lot of content creators and uh, a lot of content is going into short form video. So I know it's a big market right now. Everybody's looking at it and looking to get into it. So hopefully we'll jump on that train soon.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. If I had a staff, that's what I would hire for to begin with, would be doing the social media posts, and then the scheduling I'd probably hold on to just to have a little control over who I was talking to, and I knew like when that was coming up. So if I had a person coming up, I could do the research, or look at their social media things, think about some questions or what I would want to talk to them about. I don't have a list of questions that I ask everyone, but I do have things I like to talk about. So if I talk about to a writer, I'll have some things that cross over from writer to writer, but usually I'm trying to, I think about what I've seen from that person and then think about what what I'm thinking about at the time to
Right.
figure out what the outline for the conversation is going to be in case I need it. So I have an outline, not really specific questions. And then I think as it goes along, you get better at being able to talk in this type of format, like talking in person, much different than talking on a computer like this.
Yeah,
It's
100%.
you can have the jump in and play off of whatever the other person says. And I think it's more probably better for like the humor side of things. But with this, what I've learned is you got to let the other person talk. So you let the other person talk and then you write down, like if you have something you're like, oh, I need to go back and talk about that, or I need to talk about that. I need to talk about that. Something you don't do in a normal conversation when you're face to face with somebody. And sometimes you get back to them and sometimes you don't, like the questions, or at the end you look at it and go, well, I had a question about this, this, and this, but trying to keep it more conversational than an interview, is
Right,
that's
right.
I think that's what people listen to podcasts for. I mean, on a whole, maybe I just think about it's more of a conversation than it is an interview. And you want the person to feel like they're right there. And hopefully, if you're listening to the other person and you're having a normal conversation and not just focused on questions, that when the conversation leads to a place, that's where it leads to. So if somebody else was there, they may ask that question. So hopefully, one of the people that's talking in the conversation can ask it instead of it go, just a thing that peels off to the side and it doesn't get brought back up. So it's definitely an art to it, I think, to the podcasting and to the talking to people, making it sound like a conversation if it's not your normal type of conversation.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree with that. It's a whole it's a whole learning process, and that was a huge thing for me coming into creating the show. Um, was really just trying to create a conversation, not so much as an interview of, all right, here's a bunch of questions I'm going to ask you. Um, Mainly just coming on the show. I want to learn um, about what you do as much as you want to learn about what stuff about me. So through the show, it was a huge um, step out of my comfort zone, if you will,
Mm.
because I'm not really I'm a really conversational person, but I'm not a very deep conversational person. So just being able to dive in and hear about some other people's lives and how they run their businesses, their music, their art, their everything. It's just really inspiring, and yeah, it's really a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think that's the draw of the podcast is because, especially nowadays, you don't really talk to people that much. I mean, maybe you talk to your friends and probably that conversation is things you've talked about over and over and it's still good. But as far as broadening the horizon, I think that's the draw of podcasts. At least it is for me, is just to hear somebody else's take on something and then to get my own mind thinking about it. Or, I think that's the draw of it. I, Originally, my first podcast I started listening to was, I think, Joe Rogan, probably 2016, maybe 2015. Maybe it's been that long. I probably listened to, I mean, I remember when he was in the hundreds, and I think
Right,
he's
right.
over 2000 now. So I've,
Yeah,
I've listened for a long time. I listened to every one, and it's a hours long conversation about something, whether it's about a guy that makes knives or somebody that makes movies or whatever. Even I would just listen to all of them while I was doing things, cutting the grass, painting, doing whatever. You just listen to them while you're driving. And I learned a lot, really expanded the topics I think about. So I think that's a success. And then I listen to other podcasts now, like Let's see. The Fearless podcast with Jason Whitlock. I listen to that one a lot, even though I do feel like that has a lot of commercials, but you can probably speed through those. The Joe Rogan's commercials are easier to speed through because you can just go, the 15 seconds or use the slide
Right,
bar to
right,
go
yeah.
through if you're in Spotify. But when they're embedded in there and the person's just talking and then they say, and now I'm going to talk about this thing. Now you're like, oh, how many minutes are you going to talk about that for me to skip that? So,
Right.
but
Yeah, I've been a huge fan of Rogan. Listen, I really got into him probably 2 years ago, back when he was all in through all that controversy. Uh,
mhm.
but I've really enjoyed his show. It's got a great setup. I love how he just talks with people on a excuse me, on such a real level, and not really as much of an interview. Just two guys hanging out, or just hanging out, having a good talk.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's what people are looking for in that. So when are you still doing your podcast right now or getting ready to start it back up or what do you think?
Yeah, so I'm actually looking to start it back up. Starting to get things put together, to get back in the swing of things. I took a year off because my son was born, so took some time off to swim with him and my wife, and just learn how to be parents. so
Hmm.
so we've been figuring that out, and he's getting bigger, and I have more time off work now. So while he's taking a nap, I'm usually trying to create content.
Okay. With your music and DJ life, what's going on with that?
Yeah, that's kind of fallen into the background a little bit. Um, I used to be doing some concerts with a buddy of mine. I've always gotten into the live music production, such as like sound and audio engineering. That always drew me in. So he called me up one day and said, "Hey, um, you want to come do a show with me?" And I never really thought about doing a show. Um, so I said, "Yeah, well, let's do it. Let's see how it goes." So we did that show on. It was a New Year's Eve, I believe. Um, and it was a lot of fun. We had so much fun with it. Um, so we were. He had told me out. He's like, "Good job, man. Uh, I'll let you know if I ever need you again." And fast forward 3 years later, and we were opening for. I had the opportunity to go up to Ohio. I'm in St. Louis. To travel to Ohio to open for Grammy Award-winning artist Lecrae, um, who I listened to as a kid. So it was just one of those full circle moments of this could actually be something. Um, it has died down though due to having a family now, but hopefully in the future we'll be getting back into stage performances and having a good time.
So you were doing the sound for it or are you the one back looking at the stage doing the sound or are you on the stage doing the sound?
Yeah, so I was actually what you would call a hype man. I was actually on stage with him, doing his songs and really getting the crowd going, if you will. Um, but just bringing the energy and just being a supporter, um, being a supportive act, but not really a supportive act, but just supporting his act, um, and making it become what he wanted it to become.
Hmm. Did you have an instrument or anything or what are you just a microphone and
Yeah, I had a mic.
talking or okay.
Had a mic. Sometimes if he had a song that he had a feature on, I would learn that verse and then I would be able to do it, um, live during the performance. So that was a lot of fun. Um, but yeah,
What kind of have you done recordings before? Like
I
studio
haven't
recordings?
I haven't done any studio recordings. Ever since I was a kid, I've always written down, if you will, very loose poetry.
Hmm.
Just I've always been a writer of just whatever comes to my mind. So I've had binders and binders and notebooks of things I've written from like sixth grade on, and I've always dreamed of putting them to music. Um, but then I never had the equipment. Excuse me. And so now that I have my own place and I'm able to start getting my own equipment, I can I'm looking to create my own stuff. So hopefully in the future I'll be coming out with my own uh, music. So
Do you think there's a difference between poetry and lyrics?
uh, I think it's a very there's a lot of blurred lines. Um, reason being, there's poetry can rhyme, but it can also not rhyme. Like most of the time, we think of poetry as, um, I think of poetry. I say I. Um, most of the time, I think of poetry as a meaningful uh, writing that just um, how am I wording this? I don't know where I was going with that thought, but I think poetry and lyrics. I think they can coincide. I think they're uh, both the same and different at the same time. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I guess it's like the Supreme Court's view on what pornography is. You can't say it, but you know it when you see it. And
Right. Right.
I'm sure there's better ways to explain poetry versus song lyrics, but I think there is a lot of crossover where you could have one and the other, especially if growing up listening to heavy metal, but then you see the speed metal side of things where you can't really understand the words when they're saying it, but this is back in the day of the cassette or the album or a little later the CD, and you had the lyrics written in some of them, and you could follow along and you go, whoa, this is deep stuff this person's
Right.
talking about, but no one would ever know it because of just how it sounds. But I think the poetry has that lyricism to it, whether it's rhyming or not, free verse or not, that you can pick up on that tempo of it, and if you read it right, you can feel it. And then with song lyrics, you have that extra layer of the music that goes with it, and it's just more accompanying it. And I'm not sure how people or humans interact with music. I know there's studies on how plants interact with it. If you play certain music to plants, they grow larger, or it explains the idea of why birds sing in the morning. That's those certain notes that help the flowers open, and that's what they're looking for, the flowers to go around and do the bird things. But I think that people have something of that built in. Like everybody has a little bit of music in them somewhere where they can either appreciate it at the very least, something resonates with them. And you can probably go across all kinds of genres and you could still find people that are going to tap their feet to it. As
Right.
as
Right.
Outcast said, if you don't move your feet, then we don't eat. But I think I think that's probably the difference between poetry and music with lyrics is obviously it's the music part, but I'm not sure. Like I've written song lyrics before, I've written music before, and then I've written poetry, and it does feel different to me. It feels almost like it comes from a different place. I don't know. What's your experience with writing poetry or journaling or whatever you do when you write? Where do you think that comes from?
I feel like it usually just comes straight from what I'm thinking. Sometimes I'll try to put it to a rhyme. Sometimes I'll just try to keep it um, as it is, as what words come out and how they are. Um, yeah, but sometimes a lot of my thoughts and I do think in a rhyming sense because um, as a hip hop artist and musician, I really enjoy rhyming.
Mm,
But uh, a lot of it is just pure thought. Sometimes I'll have a thought in the middle of the day and just I'll jot it down and then come back and visit it 2 or 3 years later, and oh, I remember the day that this happened, and then try to build off that. Um, sometimes we'll keep going with it, and sometimes we'll throw it in the trash can.
Yeah, it's interesting how you can write something and then a few years later you can look at just a line and remember all that stuff you meant by it. I think that's why there's something more to poetry than there's some sort of more emotion than if you just wrote a sentence.
Right, right,
It's that thing of where you could listen to, I don't know if you were back in the day of mixtapes, but you make a mixtape, so you put your songs on it in the order you want it. I guess a playlist would be the equivalent now. And
right.
then you listen to that, and then you could come back to that playlist or that mixtape years later and listen to it and go, oh yeah, I remember all these feelings of what was going on in my life when I was listening to this music. Or if you hear one song and then you're like, okay, the next song is supposed to be this one because that's the next song it was on your playlist, and it's not, then you're like, oh, that doesn't feel right. You got to go back and listen to it in the right order, but you can remember all those feelings and things. So it, it's interesting how memory winds itself around sight, smell, and what you hear. It's pretty good. The When you have your writing and you take, you put your line down here, your line down there, and probably it's in the notes feature of your phone more these days than in a notebook. But what do you do when you get like to the point where you think, I'm going to go back and look at these things, and then you see how much material you have, like how much is piled up? If you printed it out, it would be pages and pages of things. How do you organize that?
Yeah, I usually just try to go back and think of that time when I created it and just see how, um, think about the time, uh, what was going on during that time, um, and if I could apply it to anything that was going on when I'm thinking about it, when I go back to it. Most of the time, I just stumble upon it, uh,
Hmm.
whether I'm just going through my phone, just seeing what's on it, trying to clear some space or whatever, and come across this and be like, oh, I forgot I totally wrote this, so we'll keep this safe.
Hmm.
But yeah,
Here's what I do and what I recommend, because I saw a good YouTube video and I can't remember the guy's name now. Famous writer, I'm sure, talking about poetry and how he's like, I write it down on paper. This is what he says. He writes it down on paper and then he works it out from there. So he would cross through something, add something else, cross through something, add something else, and then form the the poem that way. Because if you're doing it on a screen and you delete it and you write something else, you've missed what you've crossed out. You missed that idea. And
right.
his thing was keep the crossing outs, because that could be the beginning of the next thing. And I really like that idea. Maybe it's just the hoarder mindset, maybe, of I'm going to keep those ideas, but it does, you can feel the weight of a 20-page note feature in your phone of just random things you were thinking or thought you put down. And then you're like, I got to go back through and organize this somehow. And the first thing I do is I email that to myself. So if I mess it up or I erase it for some reason, I know I still have it. I may never go back and look at that email, but at least it's there. And there's some sort of time attached to it into when I thought about it. So if I had to match it up with whatever else was going on, then so be it. I could do it that way. A lot of times, if I'm writing a thought down in the notes feature, I'll put the date and the time, and that just date and the time with that line. And sometime it comes out to be a whole poem, a whole song, whatever it is, or you come back to it later in the day or later another day. And if you do, I put that date and time with it too. So you can just look back. You may never use this for anything else, but you can look back on it and go, how long does it take me to write a poem or a song or whatever? And you go, oh, it took me, it, I used to do when I started writing at the time and when I finished writing at the time. Now I just do when I start. And then if I start it again, I'll do that time as well. But you could look at it and go, well, this thing took me 7 different dates with this many different times, and maybe it's multiple times on the same day. And I think that helps me organize the thoughts a little because I can at least put it in a linear fashion. But that shouldn't keep you from saying this line goes with this thing from 2 years ago, or this line goes with this thing from yesterday. I thought it was separate, but it's the same, whether it's a song lyric or a poem or whatever. I found that helps me keep track of it. And then when it gets to the point where there's so much of it, and if I copy and paste it into a Word document, and then I try to separate it to different things, like this is a song, this is a separate poem, this is a separate poem, this is a quote from a book that I'm going to write from a character in a conversation that I just had when I was standing in line at the grocery store, whatever, that you can separate it that way. But I found what works the best for me is to print it out and then cut those lines up with scissors. And then you have these little fortune cookie type tags of lines. And then you can put those out on the table and arrange them easily. You don't have to worry about crossing them through or anything like that. You just arrange it. You can put them in piles of this talks about this, or I think about this when I think about this line. And then you can match those up, and they're going to turn into poems or songs or conversations that you never thought, but they were just coming to you throughout those, whatever that time was you started working on those 20 pages of notes.
Yeah.
I think that's a good way to do it. That's worked for me.
Yeah, that's really great. I really enjoyed that actually. That's
Yeah.
a lot.
That way you always know it's there. And that's that hoarding mindset too, is I'm going to set that over to the side and I'll have it if I need it.
Right, right.
When you're thinking about song lyrics, how do you come up with those? Are you thinking about a topic and then you write down the line and then you match them up later, or do you do it all in one sitting, or how's it work for you?
Most of the time, I just write and see what comes out. If something, most of the time, I'll go back and review it, see if there's words that I can change out with better words, um, like more sophisticated words, if you will.
Hmm.
Just try to not use those single sentence or single syllable blah words that everybody uses and repet. It's just trying to fluff it up a little bit. Um, just try to create a more intellectual conversation piece.
Yeah, I like to use big words so I sound photosynthesis.
Yeah, me too. Photos. It's my
One
greatest
of
quote.
I had a writing teacher one time that when I was talking about like punctuation and which words to use and how you form conversations in words or whatever, that her thought was the biggest rule of writing is, do you understand it? So I like that. So the idea that you can't put a hyphen like that in that line, or you can't use that word that way. If you understand what they're saying, or if you understand the idea that's getting across, then that's good. And I would think that would help in music. I know it helps in poetry, that you can also make words up, and you can make them up in such a way where whether you're using context clues in your line or whether the word itself just sounds like something that you go, oh, okay, I got an idea of what that means, and maybe I can understand it later a little better. But yeah, how about making up words? Do you do that much when you're writing the music?
I tend to, intentionally or not, I tend to make up words. This sounds like a word. We'll put it in there. It's not actually a word, but it is now. So yeah, um, I have I have experienced that and really, but I think it all depends on how you use it. Um, if you're just throwing in random words that aren't actual words,
Mm,
just to fill a spot, then it doesn't make sense. But if you create a word um, that may have a slight meaning towards reality, towards actually being a word, then I think you can get away with it, and it kind of gives the listener some an added like little treat to find if they find it. Um, it just makes it more interesting to listen to.
Yeah, I like that. The one of the ones I made up was "Ida Mighty," which I think to me is short for "I have a mighty good idea I'm trying to write down before I forget it." So if my wife says, if she's talking to me and I'm not trying to be mean, but I want to write down what I'm doing in this notes or write this thing down before I forget it, then I'll just say "Ida Mighty." And usually how it works out is she'll go, "That's not even a word," even though we've talked about it many times. She'll say that's not a word. What are you even saying? And then I'll have to stop and go, "Look, I'm just trying to take a note real quick." And then, we can continue the conversation. But yeah, I think if it's a useful word, then that's good. Hmm.
Yeah. Keep it in my mind.
How about with instruments? Do you do any instruments with the music or use any programs?
Uh, I actually taught myself how to play drums when I was, uh, I'd say about 8 or 9 years old. I got my first drum set, and my parents hated me because it was a lot of just banging.
Hmm.
Probably no rhythm to it whatsoever. Uh, but through listening, I learned how just listening to music. I would play music and pick out the drum parts in it and try to replicate that as much as I could. Um, and now I taught myself how to play drums.
Nice. Nice.
Yeah, it's
Do
really,
you do that? Go ahead.
it's really, really tough because people, oh, you're such a great drummer. Can you teach my son how to play drums, or can you teach such and such how to play drums? Just be honest with them. I don't even know how I taught myself really. Uh, I can try to teach you, but I don't have any method to my madness. But yeah, so it's just
Yeah.
something funny I like to tell people.
It's trial and error, trial and error.
Yeah,
It's like if you said teach somebody English, I'm sure there's a great way that you can build on teaching someone English, but if you just took a regular person and said teach that person the English language, it's not going to happen like it does in school.
right, right.
Mm. So then, what's your plans for the future with the music and the writing?
Yeah, so I've actually found out that I really enjoy being in the background more than actually being like the front kind of thing. So if I could find a band to play with, I would love to be a drummer in a band. I would love to help artists create their dream, their vision, and help them bring that to life. I've been working a lot with graphic design, um, social media design, and also just music production in general. I'm working on learning how to create music in like a studio setting on a computer. So that would be a lot of fun to learn how to do and actually do. Um, just to be able to say I've done it. And
Hmm.
maybe, who knows, maybe in the future produce a record. It'd be a dream come true.
Yeah, that's that trial and error. Like I look at things like GarageBand and I think, wow, this is going to be good if I can ever learn how to use it. But it's just you got to put the time in.
Yeah, I've really podcasting has actually helped a lot with that because I use my audio workstation, which is actually built for creating music, but I use it to edit all my audio for the show. So I've been working a lot with that, and it's really been a lot of fun to learn how to do it, and just you through that trial and error, just becoming better and better every time.
Nice. And you said you had a Facebook page that has all your links and things on it.
Yeah, we have it's Let's Talk Entertainment. I can send you the link, and we can get that after recording. But we can, yeah, it's Let's Talk Entertainment. We also have X and Instagram. X is LTE Podcast 2021, and I believe that is also Instagram's handle as well. I haven't been on those in quite a while since I've stepped back from the show, but
Mm.
hopefully in the future we'll be getting those back up and running. Um, and yeah.
Cool. And then, so any of your social media stuff, I'll put the links in the show notes. So if people can't find it, they can pop on there and get a link. And what's
Yeah, for
the,
sure.
is that the best way for people to follow your work? Is the Facebook one, or do you have another one that's like a main
Uh,
one?
yeah, the Facebook one is my main, uh, the main place where I push out all my content. Um, when we get when we get shows going again, I will be putting out promos on both Instagram and Facebook, because I can do that with the click of a button, send it to both of
Mm.
them, so it's a lot easier. Um, but yeah, once they'll be there. Um, if anybody wants to reach out and talk to me, feel free. I'm always open to talk to people. So I'm not one of
All
those
right.
creators that hides behind the screen or whatever.
All right. Well, I'll check out some of the earlier podcasts from the Let's Talk Entertainment, and I'm following it already. So when you start back up again, I'll get those notices, I'm sure. When
Yeah, for
you
sure.
publish it, how do you get it to the different platforms? Do you just publish it straight onto Spotify, or where do you upload it?
So I use a hosting website called Acast or Acast. I used to go through Anchor, and then I didn't really like how the audio worked on there, how I could edit it. So I went out and found a different audio audio editing software. So then I found a new hosting site. I was on, what was that one called? I don't remember what it was called, but they recently shut down. So I had to find a different hosting website, to move everything over to keep it online.
Hmm.
But we're on Acast now. That's how I distribute. Um, it's been really great. Sends it all to every one of the major platforms. So don't really have to worry about if it's going to go to one and not the other or not. So it's really nice.
Is that one that you pay for like a yearly subscription, or do you pay by download?
I believe I might be mistaken, but I believe Acast is free. Um,
Oh, okay.
I could be wrong on that, so take that with a grain of salt. I haven't looked into it in a while.
Okay.
I believe there are uh, like premium plans for it, but I believe the one I'm using is free. I try to do everything on a budget, so
Yeah. Yeah, I use StreamYard to record, which I like because of all the extra features. You don't have to be the expert sound person, and it kicks out a video with audio and also an audio only and also a transcript. So you can get those three things you can download after you record on there. And it's worked well for me. I haven't used anything else. I looked at doing Zoom when I started, but it was one of those things where you have to find something that has the features you like, learn that one, and then see how it goes. So that's the tack I took towards it. So I have that, and then I upload it to YouTube and Spotify myself. One day, I'm sure I'll do one of those hosting ones to put it out to more. But I was trying to get things straight before I went too far of a broader reach. See how long I could do it. But yeah, it's StreamYard I pay for, even though there is a free version of it. And then that Matchmaker FM, I pay for that. That's a yearly fee as well as StreamYard. And then everything else is no fee, is what I'm doing right now. But that, what was that other podcast one you were talking about? Podmatch?
it's called Podmatch,
Podmatch.
podmatch.com.
Yeah.
It
I hadn't looked at that one.
Yeah, it's really cool. Every day it sends you you can put in your interest, your likes and topics you would like to talk about. And every day it sends you two or three uh potential guests that you might be interested in having on. You can send them a message directly on there, or you can schedule right on there through. I think they use Calendly on there,
Mm.
to do all their scheduling. But I know you can schedule on there. You can also, it's a really good community of just being able to talk back and forth. Everything's in one place. Um, so it's been a real huge help for me. Um, but yeah, it's a good website.
Cool. I'll check that one out. All right. So have your links in the show notes and looking forward to your content creation in the future. Any thoughts you have in closing?
No, I just really appreciate you having me on. It's been a great conversation. I really appreciate it. And hopefully we'll be in contact in the future.
Yeah, it was a good time. I appreciate your time on it.
Yes,
I'll
sir.
talk to you on the other side of this searing drum solo that I made in GarageBand.
All right.